Well, this is a special episode because we have some wonderful people joining us at the Media Roundtable Industry Edition. I'm your host, Dan Granger, CEO of Oxford Road, and I am here with not only some of my favorite people at the company, some of the greatest minds. We have Spencer. Welcome, Spencer. We have Todd. Welcome, Todd. We have Tucker. Welcome, Tucker. But finally, at long last, we have the return of the great James Cridland on the program today. So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We don't know when you're hearing this, but I'm so glad that you're with us and that you're here to learn from this all-star team about what is going on in this industry. It won't seem to slow down in terms of change, however much we might want to. And we're going to go through a lot of different topics today. We went deep on Netflix last time. We're going to have to talk about Netflix again and again and again. There's new research coming out all the time. There's events. There's a lot to cover. So I'm not going to do any more preamble. If you are serious about the business of advertising and particularly the podcast industry and its cousin industries of audio and YouTube creator media, you're in the right sphere of influence right now. You've come to the right place. And so I say let's get into it, everybody. First up, James, bit of new research coming out on the cost of attention. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, it's really the cost of attention in terms of video. So if you look at, obviously, the cost of making video, if you're making a podcast, increases the production costs. And it increases the production costs a lot, 3.6 times. But of course, people consume video more as well. So a new study from the Podcast Marketing Academy with Lower Street has essentially found out that if you look at the cost of video per hour of attention, then producing video as well as audio for your podcast costs 77% more than audio alone. That's still quite an increase, but they do say that it's worthwhile doing video because it can drive additional consumption for both video and audio versions. They ended up talking to 300 people that make video, and it was a pretty good report, I thought, from Jeremy Enns, the man with the best beard in the business. You have seen bits about completion rates, I think, in there as well, Dan.
Indeed, we have 66% for audio versus 61% for video. I think, look, I've seen different stats on this, but I am starting to see a pattern, right? And as much as the last year or two have been about the invasion of video into what we call podcasting, the value is becoming an increasingly important topic. What is the value of that impression, and how is one impression maybe worth more or less than another? And here again is another signal that says that you've actually got people listening to all the way to the end of the program versus being a little bit more easy come, easy go. It's not significant. It's 5% in this one. But it is worth noting, and it is definitely a win in the column of audio when so many people are saying, is audio even still a factor here?
Yeah, I mean, I look at some of this information. There is new data coming out about video pretty well every single week, as you say, and it is fascinating seeing. Spencer, you've taken a look at this report as well. Have you seen anything that jumps out as well?
I was really interested when Lower Street was talking about the fact that brands are coming to them asking for video, when really in the report it's stating that 49% of the respondents are people already in the landscape, which means that they're not requesting video. That really means that it's a prioritization of video. And that can be for a multitude of reasons. It can be because of a lower ad load. It can be because the production value is higher. It can be that they do really well in one of the genres that just paves the way for video, like comedy, society, and culture. And I think the main difference in those two is that one is being prescriptive while the other is more anecdotal. And I think it's a problem when we look at the industry and we aren't honing in on the listener experience and preferencing that over anything else. We need to have like a preference, not prescription mentality.
And I think we should also bear in mind that, of course, Lower Street makes more money if you make video. So, of course, they're going to say some of this stuff as well. Tucker, you've seen the report as well.
I did, yes. I want to talk about the completion rates. I know it's only 5%, but I've been thinking about how people consume video versus audio, which we've always had when they were separate channels. But now that it's the same podcast or doing both audio and video, I'm in a different mindset when I'm listening to something than I am when I'm watching it. And so whether I'm watching something on my connected TV, that's my podcast that I'm watching on YouTube, versus my drive up, listening to the audio portion, I have a much higher likelihood of completing something in my car ride than getting distracted on my couch. And so I think those numbers make sense to me. If anything, I'm surprised that the gap isn't bigger.
Well, and we're also seeing that it doesn't appear to be hurting the reach of audio, which is, I think, why one of the arguments for simulcast, doing both if you can, as we're doing with this podcast, right? If you can open up that extra channel, we know that it expands reach. But in this particular case, they're saying shows doing video saw 49% more audio downloads. I don't know exactly why that would correlate, but at minimum, if it doesn't go backwards, I think that's a positive thing. And why not open up those extra channels? But with that, the thing that we have to acknowledge that it impacts the business, and I know for many this is repetitive, but not everything that's repeated is redundant. The challenge that comes with video is that now you have to measure the same content in different ways as an advertiser. And I can tell you, just looking at performance reports from advertisers, it is so hard for people to take the time to try to set up separate tracking and to take the time to manually aggregate them together that many brands just won't do it. So they only measure part of the response that they're getting and or part of the reach that they're getting. And it actually makes the whole pie appear less valuable than it truly is. And until we can get some streamlined measurement standards for both ad performance and impressions, this is going to continue to be a problem. So there are many benefits of the addition of video. The costs don't have to be high in most cases. And I think that's one of the big themes with this story. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of extra confusion. And I'm hopeful that, with some of the work we're doing and many are trying to do in the industry, the players are going to start to align on streamlined ways to measure.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, I think it's also worthwhile just also taking a look at Cumulus Media and Signal Hill Insights, who also have released a report this week. They say that audio is still the number one way to consume podcasts, which we probably shouldn't forget. But also, and a fascinating stat, over half of podcast consumers on YouTube also listen to the same podcasts on another platform as well. So actually, YouTube is additive. It's not whatever the opposite of additive is. It's not a replacement thing. It's an additional way to consume the podcasts that you like, and maybe a way to find new shows as well. So I thought that was really interesting as well.
For sure. Okay, now we're coming to our latest kind of 800-pound gorilla topic in podcasting, which is Netflix. So Todd, why don't you tell us what the latest is on this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been certainly in the news. It's just absolutely pounding us every time we turn around. It seems like there's something new about this coming out. We do have some new intel. We've got some new intel on what the actual deal structures are going to look like. And I believe it changes a lot. They're actually pursuing like 50 to 75 shows for early next year, for early 2026 launch. And they're potentially going to be scaling that up to like 200 shows. But I think the real staggering thing is that they're offering $7 to $8 million for year-long licensing deals to top talent. And so, on the surface, I think that sounds great for creators, right? But the catch is that they're requiring some exclusivity, and that means pulling your shows off of YouTube, which is that for me that would be a non-starter. And they're also, and I think even a bigger deal for us and for marketers is that they're replacing their host reads with standard TV commercials. And so my take on that, for most hosts is I hope that's an easy no. It's it's a 1-year deal. You're trading guaranteed money for something that's just far more valuable. That's your audience ownership, your data, the direct fan relationships that you built your business on. And so what happens when this experiment doesn't work? And there's a chance that it won't, chance that it will, but there's a chance that it won't. That's just a massive whiplash, massive gamble.
I know Spencer wants to get in on this, Todd, but when you say, what do you think works might look like? Like, what do you think the stakes are here? Or how do you imagine that success would be measured in this sort of thing?
Goodness. Well, it's going to be digital video. I mean, certainly there's going to be a pixel, or at least I would hope. But look, Netflix is behind a walled garden, so it's kind of going to be a black box until they finally pull back the curtain on it. I mean, look, YouTube is certainly no measurement attribution joyride, right? But Netflix is just going to compound that difficulty even more because currently it's in a black box. We simply don't know, and we're just going to have to wait for more and more information to come out before we can finally, peel the onion back and see what's inside.
So works could mean that it actually isn't a benefit to the advertiser, or it could mean that the show loses a lot of reach, which we know can happen whenever you put something behind a wall. And in works could mean, you might have got a good deal in year one, but what happens after year one, right? What does that second deal look like? Yeah,
exactly.
You know what I'm wanting one-to-oneing it with, honestly, is 2020. When we saw so many people enter the space without understanding what they were doing. And this doesn't feel like a clear one-to-one, right? Because there are already creators who know what they're worth. I mean, Call Her Daddy alone did a huge deal leaving Barstool, and that was all we were talking about for a whole year. And that worked out for them. But at the end of the day, if you go 50, even 50 just seems way too big a number to put every bet on. You don't know the long-term consequences of that. And what's the long-term reach is that they have to build back better for a year, and we lose all of our big brand dollars to the paywall that doesn't understand how the marketplace works.
I think that's an important one. When I think about this, I do wonder if it's inevitable though, because I'm thinking like, okay, so when Netflix calls, I think the call will probably come next week. They didn't get to us yet, but when they call the media roundtable and they say, okay, we've got $8 million for you. We really want to put this on our platform. I know that may not set me up for the best negotiation after that. I know we might lose a couple of brands. And I know you're going to take my data, and you might just have, the media schmound table come on after that because you can completely model anything that is working and pivot off of that. But like, is anybody going to say no to the money? Like, that's a big thing. James, I'd love for you to jump in here.
I think there's two things. I think firstly, removing YouTube from the mix and to make it an exclusive to Netflix. I mean, that is bad for podcasters for two reasons. It's bad because you remove the influence. There's a real flywheel of influence that goes on here. As more and more people hear what you have to say, tell other people what you have to say. That doesn't happen as much, certainly, on a closed platform. And we also know that podcasting works really well in terms of habit, in terms of consuming the same thing every single week. And Netflix needs to change their UI, and they said that they're going to, in order that podcasting actually works in this way. Removing host read ads as well. I mean, they're the ads that we know work the best, and they're removing them. I mean, that to me makes not very much sense. I think this isn't a deal or indeed a conversation about podcasting. It's all about cheap TV. It's a deal with 5 or 6 people that make cheap TV. SiriusXM, iHeart, Spotify Studios. They make cheap TV. They can sell that cheap TV to Netflix. Netflix gets cheap TV that it can sell on. They're very happy. It's nothing to do with the long tail of podcasting. Nothing to do with the secret of success of podcasting, which is where niches lead to riches. The point about podcasting is that 5 people talking on the internet about podcast advertising can be on the same platform as Joe Rogan or Crime Junkie or Call Her Daddy. That's the point about podcasting. And Netflix's deal with cheap TV ignores all of that. So I wonder why we are so excited by it as an industry.
Interesting. And what do you think could happen? Like if you flash forward 3 years on this thing, like James, where do you think this could go? What could be the consequences?
I mean, I mean, the consequences could be that very few people watch. People like, let's assume that Joe Rogan jumps to Netflix. It's not going to happen, but let's assume that happens. What that essentially means is that in 2 or 3 years' time, the next potential president of the US won't be coming to Joe Rogan because he won't be big enough anymore. He won't be reaching as many people anymore. He'll have lost all of that influence because he is on just one platform instead of on, all of the platforms. To me, it's a mistake, but it's all to do with cheap TV and all to do with a buck now. And perhaps this is a story that we'll come back to, which is that podcast creators are looking beyond the advert to other ways of earning revenue from the IP and the content that they're creating. And perhaps this other way of just getting Netflix to pay for it all is a different way of thinking about the future in terms of how the business works from a financial standpoint.
Maybe. I feel like this is going to be good for podcast overall because I'm excited for those creators who are looking for an exit that aren't all in to go take their $8 million, go flatten out on Netflix, get out of like what we think is the podcast space, and it boosts the entire quality by removing those. Like Spencer was saying, for 2020, everybody that had fame thought they could do a podcast, or every celebrity thought they could do a Twitch stream. And you realize it takes quality and it takes engagement and it takes investment of your time and your heart. So get all these people out, give them their payout and their exit interview, and then we can get back to like having the authenticity that podcast was built on.
I like the hot take. And, I think if I have a fear in this, it's that like, I imagine in 3 years, the library on Netflix of podcasts will probably exist, but it'll be completely different than what it's going to be for this first round because it's all a bunch of data collection and experimentation, right? And then they're going to decide, okay, now instead of spending millions of dollars on a production budget, as James says, you got the cheap TV dial, but you have a model and you know what people are clicking on. So you now know what you can manufacture. But if they're not going to, if they're not going to align, we just in our prior conversation and in virtually every conversation, we talk about our biggest problem is through all this fragmentation, not everybody just leaning on RSS or a unified standard. It just creates more fragmentation, and not just fragmentation of, content choices, but fragmentation in how we have to interpret the value of it. And this is one more way that, advertisers and anybody that supports this industry is going to have to do more mental gymnastics. And another, like and it's not like every new platform just adds a new set of work. It's almost like it multiplies. It exponentially compounds as we have to have different ways of interpreting it. So I think it's maybe good for consumers that now on Netflix, you have more choices on Netflix if you didn't have enough. Now they have fewer podcast choices on a channel, so they don't have to choose from 6 million, and maybe that's a benefit to some. But at least for the business side of this thing, I think it's a smart thing for Netflix. I think it's going to create a lot of challenges in the next few years for those of us that are just trying to get people rowing in the same direction on some of this. So that's a lot on Netflix. We've given them a lot of real estate today. And, I think, like I said, when they call with the $8 million, we'll just rip this this
I mean, this
episode
is
out
really
of the library.
cheap TV. This is, isn't it?
Indeed. Yeah. We'll take this one down for you, Netflix. It's fine. Okay, Tucker, well, you got a hot hand. You got another one for us?
I do, yes. Edison just came out with a piece of research talking about the podcast election, that candidates, whether that's presidential, mayoral, gubernatorial, they're going on podcasts. And we're seeing this correlation to the winners having been on more podcasts than their counterparts. So I think we saw this in the 2024 election, and we've done some research on this internally, looking through some of our performance data at genres to see how being on a podcast kind of adds reach, adds authenticity, gives you more space to talk. And so this makes a lot of sense, and I think we will continue to see this. I think there's a couple things to keep an eye out for. As more candidates are joining more shows, they're going to be joining shows that are maybe outside of news and politics. And so where I think about that going is, if you are a brand with pretty strict brand safety parameters, you need to think that there could be these candidates popping up in shows you wouldn't expect. And then thinking about why these candidates would go on, they have space to talk. It's not a 60-second ad. It's unfiltered. They're able to just be themselves. And I think when that shows through, we're starting to see the reach plus authenticity. Like, it's a great space for this channel to help. So I would imagine I'm not the only one with a lot of thoughts on this. So I'll pause there and let everybody jump in.
You touched on brand safety, and I think that's so important, especially in this political environment that we're in. It's obviously very charged, and I also believe that I think the politicians should go on these programs so that they can educate people about their policy and about their stance on things, and hopefully get in front of people that aren't stuck in a news vacuum. You mentioned these guys may go on shows that aren't the politics shows or aren't the news shows, to get their point of view out there. And I think, again, that's really important, but it's also important for the listener to be exposed to that. I just hope that, number one, I hope that the politicians can play nice, right, and not upset the apple cart when it comes to brand safety. But I also hope that that brands will approach it with with some open eyes, but also with some open ears as well, and not be so terrified. If they're going on a comedy program or something, and you have a candidate that just so happens to be on that program, they're likely going to have 50% of the people disagree with them, right? So it's a challenge, but I think that politics and podcasting is very important, and I think it's a great platform for politics to get their message across.
Yeah, this is also very much in line with what brands want, right? Brands want to be in places where we engender authenticity, but not exactly where they think their consumer is, so they can get their message far and wide. It's the same thing with politics. I mean, we literally had an issue with Richard Nixon losing out in the debate with Kennedy and being completely unlikable, and then steered the ship by going on laughing and being shown as, hey, yeah, I got a big nose and I'm old and people probably don't love me, but I'm not that sweaty guy who was on the stage. I'm actually somebody that can take a joke here and there. And I mean, we all know how that story ended, but the point is that likability, even in 2025, is important outside of just talking about material conditions or progress or whatever that they're going to talk about in their speeches, knowing that the person has your back or at least cares about their constituency, you learn that more from them being in a podcast interview, chuckling here and there, than you ever will on any given stage.
Sports fans don't just follow their teams, they live them. Just ask Stephen Abraham. And at All City Network, they get that. All City is redefining sports media, delivering daily podcasts, pre-game and post-game shows, and community-driven coverage that die-hard fans can't get anywhere else. They're also pushing the boundaries on the industry definition of podcast, striking distribution deals with Roku and Samsung to have live shows streamed across connected TVs in addition to live on YouTube. For brands looking to connect with passionate, engaged sports fans, All City is a community that converts. They offer a range of advertising and sponsorship opportunities, from turnkey mid-roll placements to custom brand integrations and tentpole ownership. With the NFL and football season right around the corner, there's never been a better time to reach engaged sports fans. If you're a decision maker looking for a smarter way to reach sports fans, All City is a strong option that has delivered results for several of our clients. To open a conversation, email advertising@allcitynetwork.com. That's advertising@allcitynetwork.com for your free consultation.
Indeed. It's so interesting to see that we have another podcast election after the podcast election, right? And I guess the question is that really even what's happening? Because the nature of the headline to me feels very much a case of, correlation equaling causation. Is that really why Mamdani won? There's probably a lot of different factors that went into that. Some of the other candidates, maybe the same thing. I think that they probably could have sat out the winners probably could have sat out the podcast. I imagine they still would have won this election. That being said, doesn't mean it hurt either, right? And maybe it's an indication that they worked harder on their campaign. Maybe it's an indication that they hustled more and they decided they're going to get there. Maybe it's because podcasts really are the new whistle stop tour spot that everybody needs to go if you want to be effective. And honestly, maybe they're like picking up the Trump playbook. This is not to say nothing of the man or his politics, but as a campaigner, I think there's a reason you have people like Gavin Newsom saying, well, I'm just going to take the tactics that were successful and I'm going to mirror those. So I think that the podcast election that we saw in 2024 was first and foremost huge validation for our industry and just the impact that it can have. And I think what it also said is if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to show up and you're willing to, kind of speak to what can feel like you're just talking out into the ether, even if you don't listen to all these shows, that there can be real impact there. And that, to the victors go the spoils. This is actually, feeding into a healthy part of your winning strategy in your election. So I suspect that, headlines like these will perpetuate the precedent that has been set. And I think that podcasts are going to be increasingly expected now as part of a campaign trail. And I think it's probably good for the buzz around the industry, but I have no idea if it would have made any difference whatsoever in this campaign. But it's fun to talk about. It's fun to see. James, now, before we move on to another story, you've patiently sat this one out, not being an American citizen. But, you can still have commentary. You wouldn't be the first person to have opinions about this country. So if you got anything, let's go.
Now, I mean, the only thing I would say is that we had an election at some point I think 2024 as well. Our Prime Minister got back in again, and he did much more podcasts than the weird guy that was trying to get in, but then the weird guy was weird anyway. And so I would have thought that appearing on a podcast would have just been very strange for him. But it's a really interesting time. But as you say, is it the cause or is it the correlation? And that's the interesting thing.
Hard to say. James, while you're rolling here, why don't you keep us going with the state of the business? Sounds like there's some information there.
Yeah, this was a big invite-only conference in Los Angeles, in your hood, hosted by Bloomberg's Ashley Carman, who, quick plug, will be on the Podnews Weekly Review podcast this week. As you can go and have a listen to that. And she ends up hosting. It's a great day. She ends up hosting a complete day, talking to people on stage and learning a lot. And one of the themes that she really noticed from the day was that, firstly, creators want to stay independent. They see real benefits of remaining independent, not necessarily jumping in with a Sirius or with a Spotify Studios. But secondly, ad revenue is just one part of where they're actually going, of where content creators are actually going. So you've got companies like Netflix that we spoke about earlier, wanting to grab all of the video for any podcast it works with. Yet, actually, you're seeing a lot of creators who are both taking ads, but they're also selling products. And they are earning significant revenue from selling things rather than selling ads. And that's an interesting side. And I'm seeing more and more of that now in terms of the coverage that I'm writing about, where you can very clearly see that it's not just can we make a big show so that we can get lots of advertising on there? It's can we also make a big show so that we can actually launch stuff of our own, that we can ask our audience for money, that we can get lots of other revenue streams coming in other than advertising. And I think that's certainly something just to sort of bear in mind. I don't know if you saw that, Todd, as well in the coverage.
Yeah, I think the ad model only, exposes creators to some level of, volatility that really every media market might face. CPM compressions, shifting budgets, economic cycles. That's all stuff that just makes it fragile, right? I think smart creators, to your point, are really treating ads as the fuel, not the finish line. And they're building revenue that they can control through those types of extensions that you were talking about, whether it be the products, community, live events, and that sort of thing. I was a little fascinated by the AI coverage. I'm always fascinated by AI, and what I found is that whether you look at it as a threat or a lifeline, AI really depends on how it's used. Companies like Inception Point AI, they're pumping out like just countless episodes with just a handful of employees, like 8 employees. That doesn't surprise me, but I think the opportunity is there for someone to someone's going to take that opportunity. They're going to push that envelope. But for the industry, when it comes to AI, it may very well be the thing that just absolutely crushes us, right? That flood of synthetic content could potentially threaten us and make, podcast just too synthetic. It'll take away what's really special about it. And I think that's that irreplaceable human connection. We kind of touched on it with Netflix and the loss of host read ads. The creators, who are going to thrive, with AI in the podcast space are going to be the ones that amplify their authentic voice, not replace it with a synthetic voice. So I know I kind of skipped the script here a little bit and jumped over to AI, but I found that to be really fascinating.
No, absolutely. Spencer, what's your authentic voice on this?
I was just thinking, I really loved the fuel comment because when it comes to the political creators that are listed, that is so true, because at the end of the day, we have to look at, how news media has trended over time. And over the last 50 years, most print media or online venues have been eaten up by hedge funds or financial firms. And there's a level of censorship, there's a level of, you know, there's no personality to it. It's more straight facts. So having a podcasting medium that's not only intimate, where you get to be your most authentic self, but you're also giving information with no outside validation is extremely important, now and always. And I think we will continue to see independent networks come about and not go mainstream, even in lieu of the Netflix of it all, where these big creators are going behind the paywall. We'll just see a bunch of independents rise up in their place.
Agree with that. I should mention I was there. And I think you guys have done a nice, astute job summarizing. One of the things that I don't know if it was different being in the room, but on the AI piece, watching Jeannie, and I'm going to forget a bunch of key nouns here, including the name of her company. But James, you can help me. Talking about the proliferation of all of these low cost shows, and Inception Point AI. That's right. First of all, like, man, are people mad about this? Like, people are really rooting against this stuff, especially you go to an event like on Airfest and you have purists, true believers who are here because, and I feel a lot of this too. We've bled for this, the authenticity and the kind of purity of the channel. And then it's like, Jeannie and Inception Point, who, by the way, I know, and I really like Jeannie. She's representing this, like, kind of this sense of an evil empire that's like marching toward us, and people are just, there's a lot of emotion in it, and you could really, I think, feel a lot of the fear in the room. And I think, just trying to zoom out from that, I think the fact that I kind of, I think because there's a relationship there already for me, it helps me to try to step back a little bit and go, what's really going on here? And try to look at both sides of it. And I felt like I'm watching her answers. She stayed very poised, very composed. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen in the next year or two with this stuff, but at some point it's going to get a lot better than it is. Whether or not the flood the zone strategy with 1 billion podcasts at once and no human QC on it, whether or not that was a good idea, I'll leave that for others to discuss. But, the way I also think about it is like, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and do I really, if you're writing something that I care about and I can pick a voice that's nice to me, do I really care who generated that content? And if I could have a bite-sized version on that and I could learn something that I'm interested in, is that really a bad thing? Like, I imagine that there's going to be versions of this that we all consume and that we all are really fine with it being synthetic. And the question is, what percentage, what's the split? What is the split between synthetic and authentic content that people are consuming and that we have to sort through? I think the whole marketplace agrees this is stuff that needs to get labeled carefully. There have to be disclaimers, and audiences need to know, are they listening to an actual human being or not? But if you're really focused on value, there's probably some genres or some types of programs where it just makes sense. It will make sense when the execution catches up. And so, just picking on that one in particular, I think it's I'm trying to not be reactive to some of the early prototypes here, because we're all on Prodigy right now with this AI stuff. And when it gets really good at doing it, the big multi-billion-dollar question, I think, is how much of the market will it actually maintain, and how do we make sure that we don't get run over for those of us that really care about the human connection piece? I don't know, James, maybe you got another thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, I see a bit of a difference now in the way that Inception Point AI is talking about their products than a couple of months ago, where they were very combative. And they basically said, if you don't believe that the future is AI, well, you're just a lazy Luddite. And
that wasn't in winning friends and influencing people.
And she's not. And she said, if you're calling this AI slop, so for the next week, whenever I was talking about Inception Point AI, I called them an AI slop company, which I don't think endeared me to particularly much. But I mean, I think the issue here isn't AI being used in podcasting. I think the issue is AI being used unchecked and unfettered in podcasting, and having 200,000 podcast episodes which are out there, which are competition for the rest of us. Let's not forget competition for the rest of us that are produced by automated AI, and and just doing. I mean, there was one of her shows which was the history of Sydney, and it was talking about Sydney being in New South Wales in Australia, starting in blah blah blah, and just up the road from where Captain Cook landed, and and all of that. And then in the middle of it, it started talking about Sydney when she had that jeans advert a couple of months ago, and it had switched over to the history of Sydney Sweeney. But nobody had
really want.
Nobody had listened to it. Todd, have you any other thoughts on that?
I don't know if I can follow that, but no, Dan, you just made me think of something, and it's interesting, right? Because you mentioned your audiobooks, and that it doesn't really matter, what that voice is, as long as it's soothing to you and you can get through the book and you can listen, right? And when I think about podcasts, I like to find like the most random, bizarre, obscure type of stuff and listen to it just to kind of put it out there. And I can see like these AI synthetic podcasts that are being pumped out. I could see them serving some sort of deep into the long tail with these really super niche type of topics or categories where maybe it doesn't, draw in a ton of people because it's so just out there and so niche. So I don't know. That was one thing. But the other is just quality, right? So I haven't listened to it myself, but I can't help but see it in the news all the time lately about this AI artist that's created a Billboard topping country song, Breaking Rust. And if this song is as good as they say it is, and it's good enough to get onto the Billboard charts, and this is music, it's country music. So it must be good enough and high quality enough to make it to the Billboard charts. So I think that quality AI content is possible, but to your point, the industry absolutely needs to be very, very cautious about replacing that human connection that I was talking about a while ago in order to make it work.
Yeah, I would say like you wouldn't think that a trivia on a Snapple bottle is the same as the history of the decline of the Roman Empire. Like one takes a lot of effort and one is the other, but you might get some of the same information. And I think that's the difference between AI and human, like the effort and the touch.
Well, and I think for us as like professionals, they're the things that we're talking about here, I think are good reminders to us that are using AI for anything. You still need a freaking human to filter the thing, or you're going to have weird stuff coming out on your behalf. And somebody's going to think differently about you when they can tell you didn't QC the output, right? Like, I think that's something. And I preach AI usage vigorously inside this company because I think it's important. However, that doesn't mean we check our brains at the door and we don't check our work, right? And if you're in the creative business and you're putting information into the ether, that's your brand, and I think there's maybe something to be said for that. Overall, I thought it was a fabulous event. I had only been to one before, but I thought this one was exceptional. Ashley did a fabulous job programming it. and really did a great job bringing two perspectives on a few different issues. She had the Midas Touch, the eldest brother from the Midas Touch program, talking about his business, and then another gentleman that represents a lot of folks on the right. And not that it was to specifically have them argue about anything; they were separate functions. But she really gave a nice picture of the whole industry. I thought it was a great event, and she's just very good at this. And speaking of events that oftentimes have smart people programming them, Spencer, what do you got?
We are covering Podcast Evolution, March 2026. It's on the books. It's going to be at South by Southwest. No more running between a ballroom and a bar. Now it's in one Texan desert. And we're wondering, how do we think about it? It is the start of this rollout between Sounds Profitable and Podcast Movement ahead of New York in September. I'm personally excited to go somewhere that people have heard of before and are excited to hear about. So how are we feeling about this first rollout?
Well, I think it's as good as James Cridland's involvement is, frankly, because he is a master programmer. Although, are you so James? Do you have a hand in this or not? Will you have a hand in this or not?
No, I'm not involved in this.
Then I'm not going
in this event at all.
Period. Okay. Different conversation. No, listen, I'm glad to see. I think what Brian Barletta has been doing is smart. Really going to where people are with the, podcast movement has been something we all go to. It's just sort of, it just is what you do, I think, for a lot of people in this industry. But I think that as Sounds Profitable has gotten involved, I think the idea of doing one in New York, and rather than making people go to another different location that's separate than other locations, I think it makes a lot of sense to roll Evolutions into South by. A lot of people are going to be in town. So I'm interested to see what he does with it. I'm sure you'll see us there. I'm sure we'll be engaging to some extent with this effort. And, we're friends of the Sounds Profitable crew and its affiliates. So this should be a good one. We're running out of time here, folks. So we're going to rapid fire on some of our honorable mentions. Only the hottest takes. We won't go full round robin. But James, do you have any news for us on the changing of dollars changing hands in this business?
Just one, Stingray, which is an amusingly named radio business up in Canada. They have bought TuneIn. TuneIn is a massive, massive thing for radio and for podcasts. TuneIn is in lots of cars, lots of smart speakers, all of that. It's how a lot of people tune in to the radio and tune into podcasts. And it's now bought. Stingray has now bought TuneIn for $175 million US, which is interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what they do in terms of ad sales, because TuneIn in the US is currently sold by iHeart, which Stingray is a competitor of in Canada. So not quite sure what that means for ad sales long term, but TuneIn is a company that's always needed a bit more money. And I've been involved following them since about 2002, 2003 or something. So really good to end up seeing them with a new lease of life with a new radio company. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the iHeart thing will be certainly interesting and something definitely to watch. But I think it is a really big deal, and any acquisition with this size is obviously going to come with real pressure to justify that spend really, really fast, right? So that usually means two things. You're going to have to push revenue and grow advertiser volume, period. CPM softness is going to be a common lever, obviously. So my hot take is, if you're a buyer, this is the moment to check out and see if there are any deals, value adds, or preferred partner opportunities. I'd be watching those CPMs over the next 6 to 12 months. Stingray is likely going to need to show results fast and justify their deal. So this could be a good time for promotional rates.
Do you think there's pressure after a merger on the merged organizations? What are you talking about, Todd? I think what I heard you say is you should do business with recently merged organizations. That's what I took away from this. That's my
we can
hot
help
take.
those low CPMs.
Okay. Moving on, our friends at Podscribe are now offering in-store attribution. It's so funny. When we started in this business, it was like we one of my first campaigns ever, and I think some of you guys were involved in this. From another angle, it was like Dollar Shave Club, where it was revolutionary that you no longer have to go to brick and mortar to buy anything ever again. They can ship a razor blade to your house and you can avoid the store, right? And, what's old is new, what's new is old, and it all comes back around. And so now we have to come up with fancy, sophisticated ways of figuring out what is in brick and mortar sales data, and they're using Shopify and Ibotta to try to unify the performance into a way that you can actually make sense of your ROI. And this is a good announcement because we work with a lot of D2C brands, always have, but the challenge is always measurement when you can't throw a promo code or, heaven forbid, a vanity URL, as we keep telling you not to do and you keep doing. Measurement is hard. And if you're doing brick and mortar, it's like, well, can't use podcast has, I think, been a bottleneck for a lot of advertisers in this space. So congratulations to Pete and the Podscribe crew, friends of the show, friends of the agency. Glad to see them continuing to innovate here. Tucker, I heard you were on fire with your hot take on this, but you're not jumping in, so I don't know.
Well, you were taking such a positive note. I want to keep with that.
Go ahead. No, please.
I don't have a negative note. I have a cautionary one. I think it's awesome that we might be able to connect what we do from a semi-digital channel back to brick and mortar. I mean, let's just see. You have to have a publisher who accepts that. Your system, you have to be on Shopify POS, or you have to try and connect to Ibotta. The client has to be willing to pass that data back and forth. So overview is awesome. Let's see how it actually works in practice and how many advertisers it can actually unlock things for. But if it does, I mean, like you said, everybody went online because it was cool. Then it was cool to have a pop-up store, and then you get an actual store. So we're now having to create measurement solutions for problems we created. We could have just stayed in brick and mortar, but
interesting. We could have the cashier go, "How'd you hear about us?" By the way, that'd probably be a lot more accurate. But no, that's great. So the gate is narrow, and I think it's interesting to see us taking steps in that direction. But you're probably right to call out some of the complexities there. Tucker, not Tucker. You're done, Tucker. You're cut off. Spencer, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I'll take us home. So diversity in Hollywood has been a huge topic for about a decade, I would say, culminating in the Oscars So White campaign and a larger rollout in the economy so that they could bring more diverse voices in. I think the main takeaway from that entire campaign was that opportunities have to be created for the people so they can actually win the awards versus putting all of the stakes on the academy. And now USC Annenberg has come out with a report basically talking about the lack of diversity in the top 100 popular podcasts. To be clear, not all podcasts, just the most popular. So what does the industry respond with, or how do we feel about that, knowing that brands will buy whatever as long as it works? Doesn't matter who's behind the mic.
Tucker, you're up with the hot take. You want to pass on this one?
No, I can't let an article about USC go without talking about it. I'd be curious to see. I think the stat is interesting, and we should definitely focus on representation. I'm wondering, as we talked about a couple articles ago, these podcasters are now starting to be mini businesses. They have their show, they have their products that they're looking to sell, they're doing all these engagements. So I would love to see the stat comparison against CEOs. Like, are there more female podcast hosts percentage than female CEOs? just because these podcasters are their own businesses? And is the trend for the top 100 for the shows that have less than 200 episodes that are maybe on the newer side? Are we seeing progress there? And is that percentage higher female than the people who have been established for 10 plus years?
Yeah, I find this this data quite worrying in terms of, if podcasting is only is only white males, and particularly for business and tech shows, 92% of the hosts are male. That's a real worry and a real concern. I mean, the interesting thing is the only category where women are slightly in the majority in terms of hosts is true crime, and they are 90% white who present that category, and they talk about mostly really nasty crimes against women. So none of that works particularly well either. I do wonder whether or not we could do something in the industry, though. There's something that happens in the UK that Ofcom puts together. Ofcom is the FCC in the UK, if you like. It's the media regulator. And one of the things that you have to do for Ofcom is complete a diversity piece of data every single year so that we know who is in the broadcast industry and what kind of diversity across all of the different parts of that industry. Who who are people of color, who are different sexualities, all of that kind of information. We've got that information for the UK media industry. As a result of that, I would love to see that kind of information for the US podcast industry or the North American podcast industry. I think that would be really helpful to help us understand what the industry is like and help us understand whether we are mirroring it, whether we are doing better overall than the industry, or whether or not we've got a long way to go as well.
Well, and James, who do you think would be best positioned to get that type of data?
I mean, one of the obvious people is somebody like the IAB or someone like Sounds Profitable to pull that data together. The benefit of the UK model, of course, is that it's part of what you have to do if you want to be a licensed broadcaster, which isn't quite the same here. And I think getting the data would be difficult. But I would love to know, if there is an event which is an event where only 5% of the senior speakers are people of color, is that better than where we are in the industry? Is that worse? We don't actually know. And until we know what the industry is like, we can't really have a proper diversity plan for how we improve any of this and how we make sure that podcasting is there for everyone, not just for white guys that don't bother putting putting hair gel into their hair when they turn onto a video podcast. Not that I'm mentioning anybody here.
Those shows can fetch a premium, as I'm told.
Yeah.
I'm going to ignore that or else I'll die laughing. But basically what I was thinking too is that if you show as maybe a brand that you want to speak to a specific amount of people, I would say that that is helpful and something that we can do from the media perspective and the brand perspective, because we talk a lot about the authenticity of specific audiences on a global scale, but there's also specific pockets of people in America who have very different tastes, who have different cultural backgrounds, who have different interests. And it doesn't always have to be on the digital side where we target, but being more inclusive in whether the creative is the stance or just the media analysis could also really help push the needle, because networks won't meet the demand if it's not there.
I think that's a good point. There was one other thing about the article that I thought was really interesting is the difference in male-female split of guests between those shows. The hosts that are male have predominantly all male guests, and so I just think this problem starts to stack. I know I was saying about the CEOs and correlations there, but there is a real issue that if you're not even bringing female guests on, those people don't get exposed to maybe be their own podcasters. You don't hear that difference in voices like you're saying, Spencer. So that is all very real, and it compounds with each of these pieces that makes up the podcast beyond just the host and down to their guests and then ultimately down to the listenership, and you get stuck in this spiral of you can't get out of. So it was really interesting to read some of those findings and to see, well, to James's point, like, how do we even do anything about it unless we know how we're tracking and what to do? What are the actions to take out of it?
Hear, hear. More questions than answers, but I'm getting the hook here. So we're going to conclude this episode of the Media Roundtable podcast. I want to say thank you. I didn't say all your last names earlier, but let me say your proper names for your contribution. Spencer Semonson, Todd Elbrink, Tucker Peleuses, and of course, James Cridland. Thank you for your contributions today to our efforts. You may not know this, but this show is brought to you by Oxford Road. We're an ad agency, and we help. We don't just help our clients. We really do try to help our clients, but we also are trying to build a better industry around us. Hopefully, you're getting some of that today. If you're a marketer and you want to check us out, go to oxfordroad.com, and we have a weekly newsletter. It's called The Influencer. It's free. James, do you subscribe to The Influencer?
I do. Yes, okay. I do.
And you have a newsletter too, I've heard, or two or more.
So they say.
Talk about that. What's that one called? You should get free plugs.
Thank you.
We want Netflix to call you too.
So there's a daily newsletter which is all about the business of podcasting. It's called Podnews, and you can get it for free at podnews.net. And there are also podcast versions of that, as well as a slightly more business-focused thing every week, the Podcast Business Journal as well.
Beautiful. If you have feedback and you want to tell James how he can be a better guest, email us at info@mediaroundtable.com. We'll pass that along. And if you like shows about creative, check out Ad Infinitum. It is the gold standard, and it's only possible because of the beauty of podcasting that we can have such a niche thing. But if you're into that, you're going to love it. Special thanks to not only our guests, but Haley, Bianca, Kyle, Ezra, Rocio, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.